A bill that would bring sweeping oil and gas regulation reforms to Colorado was formally introduced this week. Nearly 400 people testified in front of the Senate Transportation and Energy Committee, creating a marathon 12-hour meeting that ended with the predictable bill passing on a 4-3 party line vote. Meanwhile, former U.S. Senator Ken Salazar expressed his concerns that amending the state's oil and gas regulations could virtually ban drilling in some locations. Patty, the amount of people was impressive, but I guess I wasn't terribly surprised that a lot of folks would want to testify for and against this bill. But Ken Salazar coming out against it as vociferously as he did, and I realize he's done some work for the oil and gas firm, but it made me think this could have been a whole different story, thinking of way back when who we thought was going to run for governor, and he was the top person on the list who then said, I'm not running, then everybody else came in. It was a little surreal to watch. What was it like for you?
Well, I'm just glad I wasn't there in person for the 12-hour wait. Might have been more entertaining if it had been the sex education bill, because they lasted about as long that time. We were filming last week just when they were really finalizing this and introducing it, and you knew it was going to be draconian compared to what the current laws are, but you didn't know how far. You can see right now the oil and gas industry probably wishes they had spent some of the money and effort they spent on pushing 74, trying to defeat 112, on maybe trying to keep the Senate Republican, because it is going to be very hard for them to stop this bill at this moment as it's going. Ken Salazar's position isn't all that surprising because he's been doing work for Anadarko. And let's remember, some of the testimony that came out was from the woman who lost a brother and a husband after an old Anadarko well led to a uncapped led to a gas explosion. So killing those two. I mean, really moving testimony. Interesting that there was testimony on both sides. You also see how the anti-fracking, and really the most to the left anti-fracking forces that we've seen in Colorado, are feeling their oats, because they were definitely out protesting at the Hickenlooper announcement yesterday, and they're going to keep fighting on this. So it's going to be a hard-fought battle in the legislature, but I'm just not sure how oil and gas is going to be able to rest any concessions on this. The Oil and Gas Commission will probably wind up with a very changed mission, which gives local control and also puts health and environment before any other considerations.
David, the way it's written now, let's assume it just keeps going through on a party line vote, is oil and gas probably looking more at legal fights one community at a time that come after them? What do you think is their play after what we've seen so far?
Except their extermination. There's the point of this bill is there's no more room for legal fights. You just wipe them out, and that's the end of it. I don't want to praise, I didn't agree with the committee's vote, but as Patty said, they listened to everybody who testified. You know, usually you're on a 3-minute limit, and the legislature does that all the time on all kinds of controversial bills. It's one of the things that makes Colorado special, where just as a citizen you can come down and say your piece. You're not necessarily going to change people's minds, but at least you really do get to speak, and that is one of the ways Colorado has always been a well-governed state in that regard. This will destroy Weld County. It will wipe out their tax revenues, and it wouldn't surprise me if they start another secession movement over this, because it's no longer an economically viable county with what's going to be done with it, and they, for their own survival, would be better off joining northeast Colorado and in Nebraska or Wyoming. Ken Salazar is not only a former senator, but he's also former Secretary of the Interior under President Barack Obama, who, I suppose if you listen to Representative Omar and folks like that, he's just a murderous right-wing thug. But most of the Democratic Party thinks he's a great guy. They renamed their annual dinner in this state after him. And so Salazar has a very strong, long record as an environmentalist and also as a regulator of oil and gas. And I thought the Obama oil and gas regulations on federal lands went way, way too far. But former Secretary Salazar says this goes way over the line. I think if you're not an expert on the details of the regulations, the fact that he's against it kind of says it all.
Eric, on the political side of things, it looked to me when you saw people like Ken Salazar and John Hickenlooper, not necessarily the old guard of the Democratic Party in Colorado, but at least the part of the guard that took care of the mainstream, more the moderate side of it, and a new leadership that you see right now in the legislature and the governor's office, basically saying, we're dark blue, we don't care, thanks for your service, we're going to run it our way. But maybe I'm being short-sighted. What do you think?
Yeah, no, a few quick points. I'm going to try to state to the big picture. One is exactly what you said. Democrats, going back to 2004 when they had that big victory and took over, there was always a tentative quality to their governance because they never were that self-confident that their majority was permanent. They always thought it was at risk in the next election, a year or 2 years down the road. Now, I perceive that the Democrats don't regard their majority status is in jeopardy. They think this has turned into a seriously blue state, and that they can do, not that they have to pick and choose from their agenda, they can do the whole agenda. Secondly, back to our discussion before this session started, we were asking ourselves, is anyone going to ride the brake pedal in the Democratic Party? And at least from what I'm seeing so far, no one is on the brake pedal. The governor's not on it, legislative leadership's not on it. We'll see if a Leroy Garcia or somebody like that in the Senate ever pumps the brakes. But so far, not. It's not just this bill, but you put it on top of the sex ed bill, the family and medical leave bill, which is a pretty all-encompassing bill that I think was introduced yesterday or the day before. They're going whole hog on this agenda. Thirdly, it shows that it's not just the party that matters, but it's also the person. Think of the immense difference, as your question indicated, Dominic, between a Governor John Hickenlooper and a Governor Jared Polis when you're considering this particular piece of legislation. Democrats are not having this discussion. That bill is not getting the traction it did if this was 2 or 3 months ago when Hickenlooper was still in the corner office in the Capitol. Times have changed. The Democratic Party in this state, just as in the nation, has changed. It's moving left, and it's moving left in a hard way and in a rapid way.